For the love of a field. Oh, for the love of a field. Oh, for the love of a field. Oh, the love of a field.
And if you were to share some way that your life is seeking to be dwelling in place and looking for these practical and simple solutions, what kind of suggestions, inspirations would you give to others?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, there's all sorts of aspects of farming practice, generating and restoring fertility using, a mixture of grassland and cropland and woodland and so on. But I think, really it's increasingly with the farm, it's been the social side of it. It's been about it's been about the human relationships, and certainly one aspect of commercial farming that it's very easy to sort of burn out in pursuit of the sort of drive to profit. But the real thing on our farm, I think, has been about bringing people into the space, doing different sorts of things, some of them connected with food production and agriculture. Others, we have an educational project, for example, Shared Earth Learning, with a couple of forest school teachers that bring kids and young people with various different sorts of needs onto the site. So I think there's endless ways in which you can proliferate the social contacts between people and the natural world. And I think farming is key. I do think producing food that people can actually eat is critical, but I think in so many ways it comes back to the connection between the what nature is providing and the ways that you push it to to produce human food, but also the social connections between people on the site.
Wonderful. And you were saying something that really resonated with me, that we need to have a much greater understanding what farming is, and someone growing a herb garden on their window ledge in the city is farming.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think there's people extol the virtues of the division of labour in modern society, and the fact that people aren't growing their food and doing all sorts of other things. And maybe there's something to be said for that, but there's a loss there as well, I think. And this division of being what a proper farmer is, somebody in a big tractor, tilling the soil, and really I think we need to reclaim the term farmer. As we were talking earlier, someone who's growing some herbs on a windowsill, or as you said, even someone who's eating is farming. It's about being connected to the process of food production in as a grower or as an eater. Clearly everybody eats. That's something that we have in common. So it's about finding ways to embrace that process and sort of inform ourselves about what the issues are. Who is growing the food? What constraints and possibilities are they working to? And how can we facilitate that process? It's food leads in all directions, really, doesn't it?
That's a beautiful phrase. Food leads in all directions. And what's given
Every day mouthfuls and body and land. Every day mouthfuls of body and land. Every day mouthfuls of body and land. Food leads in every direction. Food
this is as I said, this is quite a well-drained site. The soil is quite well drained. In the first couple of years when I planted, and we got hot, long dry spells like we did this spring, I had to irrigate a few young plants here and trees. But this spring, when it was again with almost 4 months of no rain and quite hot temperatures, I was wondering, am I going to have to irrigate things? Nothing showed any signs of drought stress here. And that's a sign to me that already the soil has changed, organic matter levels have increased, because that's what really controls kind of water storage, for most plants. So already, there's been substantial changes. And carbon storage, long-term carbon storage in soil doesn't really happen without those fungi. And in annual growing systems where you cultivate the soil, every time you cultivate the soil you kill any possibility of those fungi growing. So annual based systems basically don't store carbon. In fact, they usually emit carbon, because every time you turn the soil over, a load of carbon goes into the air. So if you seriously want to take carbon out of the air, we've got to store it in our growing systems. And if you seriously want to do that, you've got to go to more perennial-based growing systems and not rely on annuals so much. That's a big step, because our agriculture depends completely on annuals. Arable agriculture at the moment. And horticulture, absolutely. So that's a big step, but to my mind, the logic is irrefutable. If you seriously want to reduce carbon levels in the air, that's how you do it. We haven't got any machines that do it at the moment, and we probably never will have. There is a lot of increasing interest from farmers themselves. I regard kind of politicians as mostly way behind here, but there's quite a lot of interest from farmers themselves who realise what's happening, and they're not going to go straight to this kind of system. They're going to go to much simpler agroforestry systems, certainly to begin with, arable, alley cropping and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of interest from farmers doing that, even though it's not very well supported in this country compared to the rest of Europe. So there are signs of change.
is our soil from Huxham's Cross Farm, 2015. It looked like the surface of the moon, and this is what the soil looks like now, 5 years later. It actually took 3 years to get from this state to this state, and we used 3 processes: deep rooting green manures, keyline ploughing, and biodynamic preparations to bring the soil back to life. Simple. So what we're doing there is we've got this field and the field at the other end of the farm. So the way it works is that the bit we're in most often by the training centre is where we're growing vegetables, and then as you come out further and further in the farm, we have the crops that we go to least often. So so we make the most use of our own energy. So what we're doing in the arable fields is we've been growing something called YQ wheat. So that's what Martin Wolf developed over at Wakelands, and Kimberly Bell at Smallfield Bakery is very keen on cooking with that. So we've gone into partnership with Dan Misford at the Almond Thief Bakery and with John Perkin at Dartington Hall Farm, and we've started another tiny micro company called Dartington Mill, and we've bought in a mill from America, from Vermont, called the New American Mill. So it mills the grains very slowly, it doesn't heat them up, so they have their full nutritional complement. And this YQ wheat is naturally low in gluten. John Perkin over at Dartington Hall Farm is growing the stronger wheats for bread making that go into the bakery, and we're milling our flour that then is we sell direct ourselves. So we're also experimenting now with new crops. So John Perkin is growing oats, and I think next year he's going to grow peas as well. So what we're doing is decommodifying and relocalizing local grains. So Martin Wolf is also experimenting with lentils and pulses. So the beans you saw in the barn, we're also experimenting with those this year to relocalize pulse production. So for instance, if you are a vegetarian and you wanted to relocalize your diet, it would be very difficult to do that in this country because we import chickpeas and things like that. So I'm sure you know the work of Hodmedod's, do you, in East Anglia? So we're doing something a bit like them, but on this side of the country, but slightly different in that we're all the farmers and the bakers, and so it's a missing link basically that enables us to financially viably relocalise food, but it's also better quality.
Wonderful, absolutely.
So what we'd hope to do in the fullness of time is also put agroforestry systems in these arable fields to look like proper soil. You can see there's roots in here. You can see the iron is still in there, but this has what's called tilth.
Yeah.
You can see we can actually see the microbial activity in there, the mycorrhiza, the fungi growing through there, and the roots. You can see we've got a little bit of humus forming up here. There's lots of air in this soil, and it crumbles beautifully, which is completely different to what you just saw in that pit. This is beginning to look like real soil, and it's going down quite deep as well.
This is after how long?
So this is 5 years on, but this, in my entire career of it working in horticulture, so which is quite a long time now, this is the most damaged soil I've seen in my entire career. The water just ran over the top of it, literally, and the previous farmer hadn't been able to grow anything in it. So what we did here is we did initially plough the field. So we initially ploughed all of the fields on the farm that weren't the wetland meadows, which sometimes is counterintuitive. And then we sowed them with deep rooting green manures. So we chose a particular mix that you can get from Cotswold seeds or have made up. So obviously this is a heavy, it's a clay soil. So we chose cocksfoot grass, which is very deep rooting. Some other grasses, I think there were about 5 types of clover in the mix, and some herbs, things like plantain. And so we had the whole farm ploughed and put down to this deep rooting green manure. We then, over the summer, decided on our contours and our key lines, and we got Nigel in with his keyline plough, so that's a duck's foot. So what we've used here is just an L-shaped bar, because you can pick them up for £100. The yeoman's plough cost a couple of £1,000, imported from Australia. So Nigel came and did that first one for us and helped us decide on where to actually do that. And it looks like a duck's foot. For that one, has a much more sort of fluffing effect. So what you're doing is actually letting the air in. The third thing we did was put the biodynamic preparations on, and what they do, which is actually scientifically proven by FIBBLE in Switzerland, so that's the Federal Institute of Organic Farming in Switzerland. What the biodynamic preparations do is they actually add the microbial activity back into the soil. They increase the biological diversity in the soil, and that's a proven scientific fact from randomised plot trials over a 30-year period. So I liken that to when we eat probiotics or yogurt or a kefir, that we know that improves our gut biome. So I liken the biodynamic preparations to eating a kefir, yogurt or probiotic drink, that you're putting the microbial activity back into the soil. So if you think about what we did, so we added the microbes, we then fed them by these deep rooting green manures that we topped off all the time. So this is basically food for worms and microbes, and then we allowed them to proliferate by removing the excess water and allowing the air in with the keyline ploughing.
All of everything that comes into this place comes from wells on the hill there, and just on the other side of the buildings, and everything that comes out comes down here. What comes in is transformed into a form that the sweetgrass, which is Glyceria maxima, that it feeds off, and hence the cleaning process starts, and also the garden process starts. In this winter, we'll coppice this, and we take it right back down to here, and we'll have a crop of rods. By the time any liquid's got this far, it's clean, basically. But there's still a lot of fertility in it. So here, if you were standing here a month or 2 months ago, it was just a sea of beautiful flowers, all wild flowers. You can see we've mown most of it. I've left. What we do is when we mow it, we leave it for 2 or 3 days on the ground, so as the seeds have a chance to scatter there. And these things were still in flower, so I left them, and I left one area.
Every day mouthfuls and body and land. Every day mouthfuls of body and land. Every day mouthfuls of body and land. Food leads in every direction. Food leads in every direction. Every day mouthfuls of body and land. Every day mouthfuls of body and land. Every day mouthfuls, body and land. Food leads in every direction. Food leads in every direction.
Yeah, so this is my farm. I started with my family 17 years ago, and we bought it with another family, and they've got 3 girls and we have 4 girls, and they've all grown up on the farm. And we got a bit of land because we didn't have very much money, and borrowed it from the bank and built it up so that we could grow local food for the local community and look after the land in many ways. So we planted trees everywhere and tried to bring back the soil, bring back animals, and have a proper mixed farm. So what I really believe is what we need for the future is having more mixed farms and having more people working the land and raising their family in a low impact way, because we built our own house, we have our own electricity, and the girls, as they were growing up, learned loads of skills about being on the land and playing in all the hedgerows and doing things on the land. And as we did that, we met other people who were buying bits of land in this neighborhood. So many people that wanted to be on the land and grow food for the local community, because it's a job that has a lot of dignity to it, and it's something that's sociable, and it's something that regenerates and revives our countryside landscape. So we formed a cooperative with all the different members of the local community who were growing and producing things on their land. And we have a community shared apple press here and different things that we do together. And what I think we need is more people going back to the land all over the country, regenerating it, providing dignified livelihoods for themselves and loads of great food for their families, and sharing that knowledge with each other, sharing that sense of community, having great parties together, doing work together, and just generally having a living, working countryside that fulfills people, and bringing new people in so that they can join into those communities and recreate a sense of culture, a sense of being in contact with the land and with each other, and supporting each other through what we need to transform society. So, you know, it's just really basic. It's about giving people access to land, and it's giving people knowledge and skills and the ability to build their own housing, provide their own electricity, grow their own food, and then the ability to work together and not be undercut by supermarkets and, you know, flooded out land with, you know, people who are commuters or second homes or bed and breakfasts. You know, it's about actually having a living, working, vibrant fabric of community. And so rebuilding that and regenerating it is an amazing, powerful thing to be a part of.
And what is it particularly about an organic based, nature-based principles where you're regenerating the land? What makes it so beneficial?
Being organic. Yeah, well, we don't put any chemicals on the land, so we try and produce everything using our own compost, which is why mixed farms are very important, because if you have animals, if you have sheep or cows, then they provide fertility, which then you can put on other parts of your land. And they're also really important in recycling nutrients around on your land. And so mixed farms are a real foundation for being able to do that, and using the resources that are around you so that you can be not using loads of inputs that come from agribusinesses and big multinational corporations. That is actually looking after the landscape in a way that's very cyclical, very holistic. And that's really important, because then you don't get all the pesticides, you don't have all the herbicides, you don't have things that deplete the soil, you don't have all these imports that actually have massive external impacts on the environment. And when you grow up on the land and be there, you don't have all of that in your life. It's not polluting your family.
a field. Oh, for the love of a field. Oh, for the love of a field. Ooh, the love of a field. Oh, for the love of a field.